So the good thing about the slipper clutch and the spur gear assembly right here is it's really easy to use, it's really easy to figure out, and it's just basically one little nut. And that's how you also change your spur gears, just by that one little nut. Now this doing and setting your slipper clutch is pretty self-explanatory and easy. Basically you go all the way until the nut can't tighten down anymore, and then you go back 2 full rotations with your keeping an eye on your tool here and making sure you get 2 full rotations. That will bring you back to the stock kind of slipper clutch setting. So now you see the springs on tight. This means that you most likely, if the spur gear spins, no matter what, it's going to spin this because it's on there solid and tight. So you look where you're at and you go 1 full rotation, 2 full rotations, and now you're there and you have your base setting. Now depending on where you're running and what track or surface, you might want to tighten it up or loosen it depending on your traction. Dirt track, you don't want to give it power and have it automatically go and then you just lose complete traction, so you want to run it back a little bit so that you don't have so much pressure, so that the wheels don't spin out on you. Whereas if you're on carpet and you got complete traction, you're going to want it a little bit tighter. So you can adjust that and play with it. It's all good fun setting stuff, and that will help you learn how to drive a little bit better and set up your gearing with the pinion and the spur and your slipper clutch. So this is the motor. Again, we're going to put it back in here and we're going to talk about the mesh, which you hear on the forums a lot. Is basically putting the mesh of the gears, basically the pinion and spur gear meeting up, how far apart and how close up. If it's too close, you're going to overwork the motor because it's actually putting pressure on the shaft, and it's actually putting pressure on the shaft if it's too hard, too close together. If it's too far apart, you'll end up creating little teeth marks and stripping out the spur gear. So your mesh has to be, the better your mesh is, the better your truck's going to run, the smoother, and the more you're going to be able to save your motors and stuff from running hot. And the same with the ECS, because they won't have to work as hard to get the job done. So basically we're going to put the motor back in, and as you see the 3 holes, most standard can motors, even your brushless motors, will have these holes, and then you'll line them up, and basically you want to screw them back in to hold the motor on once you get it there. So now that you see the one up here is in, so you see you're allowed to move it back and forth a little bit. So, and you have that hole in there, so we can go ahead and put that screw in there but not tighten it down. And we'll kind of just let it set. And then we put our pinion gear back on. You might have to move out the motor all the way so it drops down, and see how it's separated now. And then we look for the flat shaft, and then we'll go ahead and tighten that little set screw so that it doesn't go anywhere on us. But then again, you see how I had it all the way down. Now the spur gear and the pinion gear aren't meeting right in the middle. You also want to have them meet all the way in the middle. Don't have it too far out like that, and don't have it too far in. You want to get your best alignment that you can and have it right on the money, because the mesh is everything, I think. So now when you look at it, a lot of people say to go ahead and put a piece of paper in here and press it together. Other people say the sound. Mine is the feel. You can be too in when you're feeling you have to push it, quite a bit. When I'm out, everything's kind of spinning. When I'm in, it's just kind of, you can feel sometimes, and then you bring it out and there's a little looseness right there, and you just want to snug it up until that looseness is just a micro bit, and then you can tighten it down. So that's setting up the mesh, and that's what they talk about: your pinion, your spur, changing your gearing, upping it or downing it. I like to mess with the pinion a little bit more than the spur gear, so some people like to mess with the spur gear more than the pinion. But that's how the slipper clutch and everything, so it's not really intimidating, very easy to figure out. It makes it easier to gear your depending on what kind of track you're running on and what you're planning on doing. If you might have a small track with a lot of turns and technicals to it, and you want great jumps off the line and great jumps off the corner, then you may want to gear down so you get some torque on your spur gear, and gear down on your pinion gear so you get more torque, and gear up on your spur gear so you get even more torque. But you're going to lose that speed. It's a give and take ratio. So next we're going to go into the top gear, the idle gear, and the differential, also known as the transmission. First, I have to take off the axle shaft and yoke. We'll get into these later. These are the VXL drive shafts. I did change and upgrade from the stock ones, and that's why they look a little bit different. I'll explain what I did and show you what I did in order to get these to fit and work. But I'm just going to remove the set screw here and have that come out, and then you have 3 screws right here that can just pull out. So that's your axle coming out of the differential transmission setup. The 3 screws right here, we'll go ahead and take those out, and that will open up the back gearing. Now there's not really anything to do back here. There's only a couple things you can do. If you're hearing a strip noise and things aren't moving, and your spur and pinion look fine like they were on the other side of the setup, then most likely it's the top gear or idle gear in here. Sometimes it's your transfer gear. They do sell a metal gear set for it, but then again, you're adding weight if you're doing that. I wouldn't change them out until you need to. And you know, a lot of it also may have to do with setting up that slipper clutch we talked about. If you're driving it hard off the line and you're putting a lot of pressure and power on those gears, yeah, they're going to snap. A lot of good big drivers will tell you that when you're coming off a jump, you know, don't give it full gas in the air, because when you land, you're putting all that strain in the transmission when you land. And so taking jumps is an art with it in the hobby grade. So after getting those 3 off, you just kind of... So we popped open the gearbox here. We got the top gear, idle gear, differential. Idle gear, just all these gears just come right out. This is the way it would be set up. So you got your top gear, idle gear, differential. Inside the differential, of course, is the kind of like transmission type where one wheel will spin, the other wheel will spin backwards, or they'll both spin forward if it's moving, or backwards and forwards. So those are your 3 gears. As you can see, they all have ball bearings. If you need to pull this out, this gear here is your differential. Inside is metal gears. There's 4 screws right here to open it up if you want. But normally, if this is going bad, you're just going to want to get a new one. It's not worth the hassle. And so that just goes in there. They all fit snug. If you're in here, I would recommend putting black grease on the gears. Black gear grease would help in this area, not the transmission and not the spur and pinion gear, but in this area would help. And then, of course, the ball bearing oil, motor oil. Not like the bushing motor oil that we're using. This is for high-speed miniature ball bearings, and you can take it and just add it a little bit around the ball bearing. And that will give your bearings nice maintenance to keep them greased up. So that's an example of just getting one of those greased up with some high-speed ball bearing oil. So that's that. 3 screws in there. You just snap it back on and put the screws in, and you're good. We did take off the axle shafts with the set screw. Just 1 screw that goes through and screws onto the edge of the yoke here. Next, we will be talking about the VXL drive shafts to from stock transformation. So that will be on our next bit here.